Hi there, and welcome to the Cross-Examination Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Asregadoo, one of two hosts on the podcast, and you are?
Brian Feinberg, Deputy District Attorney. And I got to be honest with you, Ted, I am HOTTOGO for the DOG podcast today.
Thank you, Chapel Roan reference. That's
good.
This is
fantastic. I'm so glad.
We are doing something a little different this time. We are recording this on YouTube, but if you're listening to this on the audio version, don't worry, we will explain what we are doing and why we are recording it on YouTube. I think that'll become obvious in a minute. Brian, you've heard the phrase man's best friend, right?
Oh, indeed.
Right. So it refers to dogs. It refers not only to our human relationship to dogs, but dogs as companions, as protectors, but also as emotional support. Do you have a dog?
We do. In fact, this is a podcast that means a lot to me personally. A close family member of mine has a service dog. Mm-hmm. We have a service dog that lives in our house with us. And to describe them as working creatures is almost an understatement for just how powerful the work that these dogs can do. They are amazing, amazing creatures. It was life-changing in my family and my household. And when I see what these dogs can do in the courtroom setting and working with people who benefit from the incredible skill set that these trained dogs have, it is really remarkable. And I'm so glad we can talk about it today.
I think you tipped your hand on what the episode is about. The district attorney has a facility dog. His name is Bear. Bear came to the office in 2019. As I said, it's what call a facility dog. And what that means in terms of the work that the district attorney's office does, or at least part of it, will be the topic of this episode. So let me tell you who our guests are. First off is Janet Wright, who does a billion things at the DA's office, but she is primarily Bear's handler. Where she goes, he goes. Michelle Williams is the Senior Manager in Public Relations and Marketing at Canine Companions. Something, I don't know if did you receive your dog from Canine Companions?
No. We
something similar?
Something very similar. A place called Chatelaine Retrievers down in Vista, California, where the trainers do amazing work.
Okay. And we're going to actually talk about some of the amazing work Canine Companions does. So we're going to talk to, in the second segment, a couple of trainers. One is Jo Otico. She's really Joanna, but she goes by Jo. She is a trainer at Canine Companions. She's like the specialist. And then we're going to talk to a volunteer puppy raiser. Her name is Pam Durkin. I think with that, we might as well just get into it, right?
But first, Ted, I got to ask
you,
is it just the people who are here joining us today?
Is it just? No. We are actually going to have in the third segment, so that's three. So I guess this would be the fourth, right? Because we're counting. I'm not good at math, okay? Let's just get it out there. If you saw my SATs, you'd be like, can this guy even balance a checkbook? I know you don't have to do that this day and age, but back then when I took the SATs, you did. Yes, we will have Judge Terri Mockler in a separate segment to talk about the use of facility dogs in court and how she deals with it in the courtroom setting. So that will be kind of really interesting too. So just a packed episode, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
So let's get it started. First segment, we've got Janet Wright. Hello, Janet. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I think I'm okay. And Michelle Williams from Canine Companions.
Yeah,
Michelle.
Thanks so much for having us.
So Jen, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about what you do at the DA's office with the facility dog that you handle, Bear.
I will try to make this as short as possible. So we use Bear primarily for forensic interviews of children who've been sexually assaulted or molested. We work him in court. So if a child or an adult have to testify, we bring Bear in to kind of provide some comfort while they're sitting there in front of a bunch of strangers and having to tell us some of the world's worst things that have happened to them. And then aside from using him in those roles, we do use him a lot with outreach, so visiting schools.
So mostly with children he works with.
Yes.
You ever work with adults?
Yeah, pretty often. Actually, a couple weeks ago, we were working on a case that involved actually a whole family, so 2 parents and 2 children. It was a home invasion type case, and Bear got to help all of them.
You're kind of downplaying Bear a little bit. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty remarkable. He's very, very keyed into human emotion. So he understands when somebody's going through a lot of stress and could you relay maybe a story about
I was going to say,
okay.
There's an amazing story that you told about him
and
a girl having a
tags.
panic attack. Yeah.
Right.
So
and that's Michelle, by the way, for those who
Sorry.
aren't watching on YouTube.
No, and I appreciate that. He's very in tune with everybody's emotions. It's and this is why he's not here today. So last couple of days we've worked with over 1,700 students just in a couple of days, and so he, I think, needed a break. But the story Michelle's referring to, it was a young lady. She had just turned 18. She was a witness, in a sense, almost a victim in a crime. She was working at a store that was that a person came in and shoplifted from. So she had to testify against that person. And as she's sitting on the stand, she starts to, like, her breathing just changed, and you could see her almost hyperventilating. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? And from underneath the witness stand, I hear the jingles of his tags. And I'm like, what is happening? Are we about to get thrown out of court? He's not supposed to be making any noise. And as soon as I heard the jingles, she stopped. She went from hyperventilating to like, okay, I've got this, and just kind of keeps testifying without it was just a very slight pause. And we've been trained to notice these things. Nobody else, I don't think, would have noticed. And she's just going about her business. And so when she gets off the stand, I'm like, what just happened? I heard the jingles, I heard movement, and then you kept going. She's like, I was having a panic attack. He felt it, got up, put his head on my lap, and I was able to continue. And I was like, whoa, okay, all right, that's all him. That was all him. So,
Michelle, can you talk a little bit about the difference between what I think people sometimes refer to as a support animal versus a true working dog and the facility dog training that someone like Bear might have gone through?
Yeah, absolutely. So, emotional support dogs or therapy dogs are just wonderful pets who are invited into public spaces to help. They work in a number of settings and they do wonderful work. But what's so incredible about Bear and facility dogs through Canine Companions is that they actually learn the 40 tasks that service dogs know and use those tasks to help with their handler in professional settings. So like you mentioned, Janet's absolutely downplaying how incredible Bear is. She's so humble, right? And so is Bear. But I've been there firsthand to witness, and oh my gosh, is it heartbreaking and heartwarming all at the same time, heartbreaking what these people have gone through, these kids, but how heartwarming that Bear and Janet can help make it better on what she said is like the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And so, I remember one time you guys were playing a game where the kid will pull out a little thing from the game, and then Bear takes his turn and he with his mouth would pull out the little piece from the game. So that's pretty incredible.
That's like that what's it called? It used to be called Kerplunk.
I don't know if
it's called that anymore.
It's the honeybee tree game.
The honeybee tree game.
But it's very similar.
Full of marbles or something, right? And
Exactly.
then pull out, each person pulls out a straw. So you talked a little bit, Janet, about some of the work you do with minors. How does Barry, you talk about a court case, but could you talk a little bit about, like, at the Children's Interview Center where Bear's there, what is his role? Does it help not only comfort, but what is it that you're trying to help, say, a minor with this rather traumatic, not only experience that they may have gone through with crime, but also in a very foreign setting, like they're in an interview setting. What's Bear's role in this?
So Michelle just touched on that a little bit with the game situation. So it's what we're trying to do there is build rapport with the child and get them to feel comfortable enough to want to speak to us. So you can tell just law enforcement in general is a frightening environment to be in for these kids. The Children's Interview Center is a little bit more comforting. There's couches. It looks like there's a playroom. It doesn't look like a courtroom. It doesn't look like our office. And the whole purpose of Bear being there is just like, how do we help you feel comfortable? And we leave it at their level. We just bring him in. If they want to meet him, they can. If they don't, we kind of let them be. I don't think I've ever run across a single child who said, I don't want anything to do with him. They start wrestling with him on the floor. They're snuggling him. They're hugging him. Going back to cases, we had a 4-year-old child once who I thought couldn't speak or hear anything we were saying. And she just didn't want to speak to us. And so when we brought Bear in, we just said, hey, here's my friend. If you'd like to meet him. They were playing games together. They were building puzzles that time. And she just started whispering over to him what happened. Without all the questions that we had asked that she didn't respond to, she just started leaning over and telling them, this is my name. And this is how old I am. And then just kind of went into things. And obviously we're recording audio and visual. And so we can pick up all the information. But he just helps them want to tell their stories. Not as easy for us humans, I don't think.
Not really. No, you're right. You're right.
What is it about the animals that help people to feel comfortable in that space?
Gosh, Janet will probably be able to speak this so much better, but I do know, like, anyone who's had an animal or had a dog, you feel that bond and that connection, that non-judgmental.
It's exactly what it. There's no judgment. I'm listening, and no matter what you say, I'm not gonna give you a weird facial expression. I'm not gonna make a sound. I'm just gonna hear you. And I think that, honestly, I think that's what it is. That there's no judgment. Yeah.
So you're a nonprofit, Michelle. You rely on a mix of volunteers, and of course you have paid staff. So tell us a little bit about Canine Companions, what the type of work that you do. I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit generally about how service animals are trained, or maybe not even trained, but the organization itself, it's got to be a pretty built-out infrastructure.
It is. It's incredible. Canine Companions is a national nonprofit that provides service dogs and facility dogs, service dogs to folks with disabilities, and facility dogs to professionals working in a number of settings. And we were founded in 1975, so we are celebrating our 50th year this year.
Right.
And we have since become the largest provider of service dogs of this type in the country. We have 6 training centers across the country and a small office up in Seattle now. And so it's just really incredible the impact that all of these dogs go on to make. And you mentioned, we rely on volunteers and donors to make this all possible. And I know you'll meet a volunteer puppy raiser. So.
Right, in the next segment. And Brian talked about in our intro how his family dog was trained as a service animal. So not all the dogs that you train work in the same capacity as Bear. So what other ways?
Yeah, that's right. So, facility dogs who work with professionals are incredible. They touch so many lives. But a lot of our dogs are service dogs for people with physical disabilities. Those dogs learn to pick up dropped items, open and close doors, turn on and off lights. Some of them even learn to pull someone in a manual wheelchair.
Wow.
We also have service dogs for veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. They will do positional commands to give them more space in public. They can interrupt nightmares, interrupt anxiety behaviors, which can be really incredible. And then we also have hearing dogs who alert people who are deaf or hard of hearing to sounds in their environment. And I think we're all hearing here. So, I never really realized before I started working here how impactful that could be. You might miss a fire alarm. You might be anxious every night and not get good sleep because you're worried that you're going to miss a meeting because you can't hear your just alarm going off. The best example I heard too is, if you drop your keys, bummer, and you grab them and you pick them up, unless you can't hear that the keys drop, these dogs can actually alert them to that sound.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
What's something that people don't appreciate about service dogs that you think that they should know?
I think there's a misconception that service dogs and working dogs in general, are kind of sad, or that, they're just working. And I just kind of want to dispel that myth, because the dogs who make it through our program and become service dogs or facility dogs are so excited to work, so happy to work. They want to work. And they may look serious because they're working. But our trainer and our puppy raiser, and Janet can even attest to this, if you tell them release, which is the cue that says, hey, you can do what you like, they are wiggly, they're dogs, they're playing, and they get fun time. We make sure that all of our dogs get about an hour of exercise a day. We want to make sure, and Janet did a great thing. She said he was a little overwhelmed in the past 2 days, did a lot of work. He's getting a day off.
He's at the spa today, actually. I didn't mention that. My daughter's taking him in. He gets a massage, his nails done, and a full, it's doggy spa. That's where he's at today.
They have dog mani-pedis or petty-petties.
It's not just that, it's the massage that goes with it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Janet, Michelle, thank you for being on the Cross-Examination Podcast.
Thank you for having us. We're so excited.
Having us. Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks, Ted.
Okay, segment 2, or maybe it's 3. Is it 3, Brian, or 2? Remember, I'm not good at math.
We got to use dog math for this show.
It's dog math. Okay. So, who we have in our as our esteemed guest is Joe Otico. Is that how you say it?
Yes,
you
it
are
is.
a trainer at Canine Companions.
Yes.
And then Pam Durkin is a volunteer puppy raiser for the same organization. Thank you both for being on the Cross-Examination Podcast. We're really excited to have not only you, but your companions as well. Why don't you introduce your dogs? You can't really see them. We'll try to get some shots. We'll probably spike them in. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll put them in as what they call B-roll, which is just some footage that we shoot after we record this, but we're going to try to get the cameras on them. But tell us about your dogs.
So I'm here today with Case, and Case is about 2 years old. She's a Lab Golden Cross, and so she's currently in professional training. And so she'll be going into our class that starts at the end of April, hoping to find her perfect person and graduate as a service dog.
Excellent. And then who's your friend?
My friend is Bonita. She is a full Labrador Retriever, a yellow lab. She was born at my house. So I have her mother. So I was a breeder caretaker first. Now I'm a puppy raiser. And she is a year old.
We heard them kind of jingle on the way in and jangle, but they seem pretty calm right now because that's what they're trained to do, right? Is to kind of sit still.
That's the goal.
It's the goal. So since you're the volunteer puppy raiser, you get them at the beginning of their lives, and you're training them for a year or thereabouts?
So volunteer puppy raisers, which we need a lot of, we rely heavily on the volunteer puppy raisers. They get them at 2 months old and have them until they're about 17 months old. And they are teaching them probably about 20 to 25 cues. And we use positive training method, LIMA. And we're also...
I take it LIMA's an acronym.
It is an acronym.
And what does it stand for?
Go. Least invasive.
Least invasive, and then maximally effective or minimally aversive.
So it's all positive training. We don't use a lot of corrections. So as the puppy raiser, we're training them on the basic cues, which then Jo and her team will use to take those cues and up the ante to have them do more professional that she'll talk about. But even more importantly, that is super fun if you want to be a puppy raiser, is that they come to different places with us because we are socializing them. You want to make sure that they're not afraid to walk in specific situations or large crowds or big noises, go on BART, go on airplanes. We do all that with them, and that's super fun to have a puppy around and everyone talks to you.
Joe, can you go back one step for us and just let us know, how do you determine which dogs are going to go into the training program? There's a fascinating movie called Pick of the Litter, which I absolutely adore.
Yeah.
And it starts very early on in terms of filtering which dogs this is a good skill set for. How do you identify which dogs?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we have our own breeding program at Canine Companions. And then once the dogs are with their volunteer puppy raisers, they turn back onto campus during matriculation is what it's called. And that point, they're about a year and a half. And so at that time, I might get a group of about 10 dogs that I'm working with. And we pretty much give the benefit of the doubt to all of our puppies. Unless there's a really obvious medical reason or a really obvious behavioral reason, most of our dogs are making it through matriculation, and then it's my job to determine if they're going to be the right fit for our program. And so I have about 24 weeks that I'm working with these dogs, and during that time, I am constantly evaluating. We go out in public, we have them meet kids, we have them meet other dogs, we have them meet campus cats. We have 2 cats on campus, and make sure that they're comfortable, confident, secure, good impulse control, all of those things. And then from there, we have a few other programs as well. So we have our hearing dog program. We have a program for dogs who get matched with veterans who have PTSD diagnoses. And so it's also my job to determine if they have the right temperament for those things. And if at any point I'm seeing something that maybe is just telling me this dog is not the right fit, part of my job is continuing to evaluate that and then checking with our training manager. So we have a number of reasons a dog might not make it in the program, and that's okay. We have dogs that go on to have wonderful, happy pet dog lives. We want our dogs that are graduating to be best of the best. They want to be working. They want to be service dogs. And if a dog communicates to me that that's not the right choice for them, then it's my job to make sure that I make that happen.
So with Canine Companions, though, you kind of have to go through a training method that's for you mentioned Lima, but that's one part of it, isn't it? There's probably other aspects of it.
So we have a puppy raiser manual that we work through, and I'm also the chapter lead for the East Bay, and we have free puppy classes that our volunteers do a couple times a month. And then, of course, we practice, and train the cues at home, and that's repetitive training for the dogs.
Okay.
I would have to think that many of the volunteers fall in love with the puppy during that period.
No.
What is the emotional journey like when it is time for that dog to graduate and go on to the next level of training?
So I won't say it's not hard to give them up. She'll be turning in August, and I am already get teary when I think about it. So because I love her for sure, but I am going into this knowing that there is a greater purpose for her, and I am hoping that I've done my part and that she will help somebody in the future. I'm hoping that they'll stay in touch with me, and we'll get to see them, which they often do. Sometimes you become, a member of their extended family. I've heard that very often from people that have our service dogs.
You kind of do phase 1 of the training, as it were.
Yes.
And then, Joe, you're phase 2. So you're the real specialist. So what is it that you're obviously training the dogs for various things. Mm-hmm. So, for example, we talked to Janet about Bear. Bear is trained to be a facility dog within court and to do specific things. But talk about some of the other ways, other uses of the dogs and the training. So maybe it's kind of a 2-part question. So talk about the training, like how intense is that? How long does it take?
Yeah, the training is pretty intense. So oftentimes people will ask me, how long does it take to train a service dog? Or like, when did you start with them? And we start the second they're born, essentially. Obviously, that's not me, that's the breeder caretaker, and then someone like Pam. But by the time they come to me, that dog has already been learning for 1.5 years of their lives, and it's my job to take the next 6 to 9 months and put those finishing touches on. We have several categories of dogs, and for our service dog category, I might be looking for a dog that's less social, more focused on just one person. They work with their handler and that's it. But that would make a horrible facility dog. So for our dogs that are a bit more, of a social butterfly, want to say hi to everyone, I might be looking and saying, we're going to start prefacing our facility skills here. Get those cover and nudge, let them have appropriate interactions, teach them to orient to other people and not just their handler. Those sorts of things start happening around week 10. So the first 10 weeks is a lot of evaluation. And by week 10, I'm taking a look and I'm saying, this dog should go to the hearing dog program. And so all of that is based on what the dog's temperament and personality is telling me. And then from there, we have our final stretch. So once we hit second semester, we are fine-tuning things. We're getting food out of the picture. We are introducing the next to equipment, power chairs, walkers, crutches, canes. We are going on long-form field trips. So instead of quick outings to do lots of skills, we're going and we're going to go sit down at a restaurant. Can you just hang out and sit at my feet and then get up and do one thing and then go back to sitting down at my feet? Because that's what real life looks like for these service dogs. And so we then get closer to the week 24, and that's when class happens, and that's where they're hoping to meet their person in team training.
Wow.
One of the things people in the wild seem to struggle with is when they can and can't interact with a working dog on duty. What information would you like to share with people?
I would say if you see a working dog out in public and you cannot help yourself, you need to go say hi. Please always ask the handler. And then the second follow-up to that is respect what they say. So there are times that I absolutely would love you to come meet the dog I'm working with. It is an appropriate situation. I want this dog to get practice anyway, and I would love for you to come interact with them. And there are some times where I'm in a rush or I'm busy or my dog is struggling with something. I know this dog is having a hard time with excitable greetings, and I don't want that to be a negative association that they're having. So if I say, oh, thank you so much for asking, but not right now, all I ask is that you say, no problem. But our graduates, they have these service dogs to make their lives easier. And if they are having people constantly ask them to pet, it is totally fair game for them to say, I'm so sorry, I'm just getting my groceries. Thank you for asking. But definitely always asking, even when it's on a service dog. Even if you meet a pet dog, you should always ask.
And Brian, you probably have seen this in court where Janet is with Bear. People want to come up to Bear and pet him and say hello to him. And she politely says, please, this Bear's working right now. This is a service animal. It's one of those things where if you love dogs, you can't help yourself sometimes, right?
Indeed, but it's like any other professional that's working. You have to respect what they're doing at the time. I mean, if you were at the doctor's office, you wouldn't expect someone to barge in and interrupt your doctor while they were working. And the same is true of these dogs.
And if I could add, so same is true when the service dog is in training. Mm-hmm. So when I take her to the supermarket, I can't have everybody coming up and going, puppy, puppy, puppy.
Yeah.
And because I'm teaching her, it starts then, so that by the time she gets to Joe, she is paying attention to me and the handler and already knows that. So we even ask that while they're in training to make sure that, they're ready to be pet.
Okay, so as we close out this segment, is it okay if we pet the dogs at the end?
It is okay as long as they're sitting and behaving.
Well, Joe and Pam, thank you so much for being on the Cross-Examination Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Judge Terri Mockler was appointed to the bench in 2012 by Governor Jerry Brown to the Contra Costa Superior Court. Before that, she was an attorney at the Public Defender Office in Contra Costa County, Solano County, and Tulare County. And she got her education at, it's now called the University of California, San Francisco College of Law. Did I get that right?
I think it's UC San Francisco.
UC San Francisco. They don't say University of California, San Francisco. All right. Used to be called UC Hastings. I'm of that age where that's what I remember it as. She is now a judicial officer in Department 27 at the A.F. Bray Courthouse in Martinez. Judge Terri Mockler, welcome to the Cross-Examination Podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I asked you before we started recording, is this your first podcast?
It is my first podcast.
Well, we're honored to have you. Your honor. Okay, so.
Speaking of first, can you tell us a little bit about what your thought process was, what your emotions were when you first heard about a courthouse dog coming to Contra Costa County?
I was all in favor of it. I remember going to the first, training educational session before the county had even gotten a dog. And I thought back then it was a great idea. So
why is that? What did you like about the idea?
I am a dog lover, and I think dogs are a calming influence on people, and they give unconditional love. I think that the court process is very traumatic for a lot of people who come before it, and anything that helps make it a little more palatable, I think it's a good idea.
Brian and I were talking before you arrived, and we were just sort of talking about court procedures. I'm not a lawyer, so I come at it as sort of a lay person, but I said something to Brian. He's like, well, maybe not. And I came at it with, look, court is two people zealously advocating for their client, whether it's people of California, whether it's the defendant. Your job as a judge is many things, but part of it is to provide a kind of balance in the courtroom. But balance, as I use it as a metaphor for fairness. Using a facility dog or the use of a facility dog in court, to me, is analogous to, say, if English was not my first language and the court proceedings were in English, the court would likely provide me with an interpreter to help me with that. So a facility dog is used in roughly the same way, I would say. It kind of is an accommodation for a witness, as it were.
Yes, it is definitely an accommodation for a witness. And what's interesting in preparing for this podcast, one of the questions is there legislation now that provides for the presence of a support dog? Yes, there is.
Oh, there is, okay.
But it wasn't always the case. And years ago, trial courts had the authority to allow a support person in court. We've had that on the books for many, many years, but not a support dog. And the legislature passed Penal Code Section 868.4 in 2017, became law in 2018, which specifically permits a trial court to allow the presence of a support dog for either side. It's not unique to just the prosecution side. And prior to the enactment of that legislation, trial courts had to use a more generic code section, evidence code section 765, I think it was, which gives judges the ability to accommodate vulnerable child witnesses in various ways, but it did not specify support or therapy dogs. Mm-hmm. In 2012, there was the case of People versus Chenault, which was a child sexual abuse case. And the trial court allowed the presence of a support or therapy dog for the child witnesses. It went up on appeal. The defense was arguing that that was improper. And the Court of Appeals in People versus Chenault, 227 Cal App 4th 1503, held.
I feel like we're in court right now. You're like citing like doctrine in verse.
Upheld the trial court's decision and analyzing it in the same way as you would, well, the law already allows for a support person, but and analyzed it the same way that a support dog functions the same way, in a very similar way anyway, as a support person. So the Court of Appeals upheld the trial court's decision to allow a support dog. Then we had Penal Code Section 868.4 enacted, which specifically refers to that case in the language of the statute.
Okay. Because as I was saying to you before we started recording and we were organizing this podcast, that I was sort of just searching around on the internet, and I saw that a lot of states have this, like their legislatures have enacted laws or legislation to allow support dogs. And so, yes, my question was, does California have the same? And the answer is, yes, it does.
You talked about the calming influence, both of a support dog and a support person. If you view the trial as the ascertainment of the truth, getting to the bottom of what really happened, what in your mind is it about having that calming influence, whether it is furry or human, that helps move toward the truth?
I think that a lot of witnesses who are either young or traumatized, adult and traumatized by events, are already so traumatized by the whole criminal justice process that they come into court, they see a person in a black robe, they often see 12 or 14 jurors that were complete strangers. They may see their abuser in court, and they can freeze up. And the presence of, I believe, a furry dog at their feet is a reminder that it's going to be okay.
Jurors, I take it, are informed because
No.
they are not informed.
No.
Okay. So some parts of the country, I found out through my little Google search, that they are, that there are jury instructions that are read, but apparently not in California then.
No, generally speaking, a lot of effort is taken to make sure that when the dog comes into the courtroom with the witness, that the jury doesn't see that. We are very mindful of the fact that sooner or later the jury is going to figure it out, especially when the witness gets off the stand and walks out with the dog close behind. At the end of a case where there has been the use of a support dog, there will be an instruction to the jury that there was a support dog, or a person oftentimes too, but that they are not to utilize that in any way in their decision. But before we get to that point, generally there's a lot of care taken to get the witness and the dog in the witness box before the jury comes in.
And a big part of that is making sure that the jurors are listening to the evidence and not using their biases or information that doesn't need to be part of their consideration. The same would be true, I imagine, of an inmate who is incarcerated at the time. The same precautions go into making sure that that information is not shared with the jury so as to taint them. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The trial court has to balance the interests and rights of the witness/victim and the rights of the person charged.
Right.
Sometimes the defense will object to the presence of the dog. I think that happened a lot more in earlier years before it was so common to use the dog. Now I think there might be an objection, but it's a fairly tepid objection. But part of the efforts to make sure that the dog and the witness are on the stand before the jury comes in is in part so it doesn't prejudice the accused, so it doesn't look like there's favoritism for the witness or the victim or so forth. So that's part of the reason why we don't tell the jury ahead of time.
Gotcha. So is it up to a judge to allow a facility dog?
It's really not anymore. Since the enactment of 868.4, the judge has to go through the analysis of the statute. And if there's a request for a supportive therapy dog, the court has to go through the analysis. There has to be some pretty good reasons on the side of the defense not to allow it.
Courtroom proceedings can obviously be very intense. And then when you add a canine, even the best trained canine, unexpected things can happen. Have you ever had any moments of unexpected levity in the courtroom in this setting?
Surprisingly, no. I would say the most that I can recall is the dog shaking a little and you can hear the collar. I'd say that was about the most that I've ever noticed.
Sounds a little bit like reindeer jingling, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. Are you the first judge in Contra Costa County to allow a facility dog within the court, or was it? I mean,
I don't
prior
really know.
prior to legislation, that it occurred.
I was allowing it prior to this statute for sure, but whether I was the first, I really don't.
Yeah, one of the first, I guess, an early adopter, as it were. Yeah, and what what you can remember from that first trial or thereabouts when you started using a facility dog? Like, was there a lot of pushback from maybe the defense?
There was some pushback from the defense, for sure. And it was a child victim. I'm pretty sure it was sexual abuse. But especially after explaining that we're going to make all these accommodations to make sure the dog's in here at the witness box with the witness, jury won't see it. I think it was okay.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. It was okay.
In addition to being a judge, you also talked about being the mother to a dog at home. Is there anything that you would like to say to your sweet puppy dog, who I'm sure is going to listen to this podcast with all of our other listeners?
I'm sorry I miss you, girl.
Now, there's a place to close out the interview, right? Judge Mockler, I want to thank you for being on the Cross-Examination podcast with us.
Thank you very much.
What would you think of that?
That was fantastic. What a wonderful opportunity to hear from the perspective of the trainers about how the dogs are raised, from the judge about what happens when they're in the courtroom setting, and what a wonderful opportunity for us to see sort of behind the curtain and what's really going on with these wonderful creatures.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of a packed episode. We not only had the facility dog handler, Janet Wright, but we had the three individuals from Canine Companions, the marketing director, a couple of trainers. And I feel like if you're not a dog lover, you will be at the end of this episode. You better be.
I sure hope so. On that note, I do very much hope our listeners decided to sit and stay for this whole episode, because it really is life-changing for a lot of people in a lot of ways.
I was waiting for the pun, because you started with a Chapel Roan reference at the beginning of the episode, and you ended with the dog stuff. That was good.
Thank you.
Do I get my treat now?
You can have your treat now.
And that is a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to the Cross-Examination podcast. I am Ted Asregadoo, Public Information Officer for the DA's office. And
Brian Feinberg, Deputy District Attorney, assisted by my dear friend, Peter, who's under the table right now.
Peter is great. And remember, you can always listen to Cross-Examination on a number of podcasting platforms like iHeartRadio or Spotify or Apple Music. I think it's Apple Podcasts. And, of course, Amazon Music. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.